And I call the member for Denison.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker, and good afternoon. Deputy Speaker, I've been in this place 7 years and I've heard all sorts of weird and wonderful things, but I am hard-pressed to think of a bill that has attracted so much sanctimonious claptrap from both the government and the opposition, frankly, as what I've heard during this debate. Mercifully, it has been punctuated with, I think, some quite powerful and accurate speeches, and I'm pleased the member for Melbourne is here. I think his speech was spot on, and I'm hopeful that my colleague, the member for Mayo, so my apologies, is going to follow suit as well. And look, what I've just said, Deputy Speaker, it is harsh. It is harsh. There's a lot of good people in this place, and both sides have got a lot of good ideas. But when I say I've never heard so much sanctimonious claptrap, it's because both the government and the opposition are either unaware, I can't believe they're unaware, perhaps they're just ignorant or sidestepping the fact that when David Gonski first came out with his recommendations, he came out with a figure of our education system needing an extra $5 billion a year, each and every year. And in fact, $5 billion was a 2009 figure. So if we were to index that for inflation, we should now be talking about the need, the pressing need, legitimate need, for our schools in this country to be getting an extra $6.5 billion each and every year. But what have we got? Well, we've got Gonski Light, that was introduced by the Labor Party under Prime Minister Julia Gillard, $15.9 billion over 6 years, which is $2.65 billion a year. And now we have the LNP proposition of $18.66 billion over 10 years, or $1.86 billion a year. It is self-evident, Deputy Speaker. I would have thought it is self-evident to everyone in this place that both the LNP government and the Labor opposition are nowhere near delivering Gonski, and it's disingenuous for both the government and the opposition to come in here and to be so sanctimonious and have this catfight about who's delivering the real Gonski. Well, frankly, no one is delivering the real Gonski. No one at all. And this is at a time when, in this rich and fortunate country, we can afford to deliver the real Gonski. We can afford an extra $6.5 billion a year for our schools and for our kids. It's all about priorities. Now, let's put $6.5 billion in perspective, Deputy Speaker. When I look at the budget that was released in recent weeks, I see that expenditure in this financial year, or this forthcoming financial year, fiscal 17-18, is estimated to be $459 billion. So in a country and at a time when we can find $459 billion to spend, we can't find $6.5 billion to spend on our schools. What is wrong with the priorities in this place? A federal budget of over, well, it's approaching $500 billion a year, and we can't find $6.5 billion. We can find enough money to double our submarine fleet, even though we can't find the crew for the existing 6, but we can't find the money that David Gonski determined we need to fix our schools now, and in particular to provide the standard of education that all of our children need, including those with special needs. Because at the end of the day, a lot of kids will get by well enough, but our kids with special needs, those with learning difficulties, those gifted children, all of those children in our community that need a bit of extra money. The money's there in the budget this year, but yet this parliament and this government and this opposition don't think it's a high enough priority. Surely we know in 2017 of the importance of education. Of course it is a building block for this country now and into the future. It is an essential building block for us to succeed in the knowledge future economy. Apart from all of the advantages that education brings our children, it allows them to prosper and to get better jobs, to earn more money, to be happier, to be healthier. You know, we spend so much money on so many things, but we can't find $6.5 billion a year starting this coming financial year to achieve all of that. Instead, what we have in here is what I've described as sanctimonious claptrap and point scoring. Unfortunately, education and this so-called Gonski has just become a political plaything, an opportunity for one side to score points against the other, an opportunity for that side to score points against the other. The fact is, no, don't you start, member of the opposition. The fact is you haven't delivered Gonski. They're not going to deliver Gonski.
Order, order, order.
Let's talk about the Labor Party's performance on this. What we saw was all of these deals, last-minute dodgy deals to try and get all of the states, or at least as many states and territories as possible, to sign up to Gonski before that election. Deals like saying to South Australia, we will waive your public housing debt if you sign up to Gonski, as though the public housing debt has got anything to do with a policy that should be based on its merits and a signature on a contract that should be based on its merits. And the merit would have been that that you would fully fund the Gonski at $6.5 billion a year. And then what's all this nonsense? What's all this nonsense about, you know, First Labor and now the LNP are saying, we're delivering Gonski, but, oh, by the way, all the money is beyond the forward estimates, out in the never-never, a pipe dream, unfunded. Because that was always the problem with the Labor Party's approach to Gonski. All the money was in years 5 and 6. There was no explanation for how it was going to be paid for. There was no certainty it was going to be delivered. Of course there was going to be no certainty because it was so far out of the never-never after so many elections. It literally was that, just a pipe dream. And the government's no better now with Gonski Mark II. All of the money's in way out beyond the forward estimates, years 9 and 10 or something. So far into the future, it's just a fantasy. Well, if the government and the opposition are fair income about our kids and properly funding our schools and properly delivering on David Gonski's very, very commendable recommendations, then where's the money in this budget, fiscal 17? Instead, it's way out in the never-never. So not only is the money inadequate, it's so far into the distance that it's just a promise. In other words, neither this government or the previous government have delivered it, will deliver it. And then there's the fiddling that goes on with the Liberal and the LNP and the Labor parties at a state and territory level. I'm seeing it in Tasmania, where all this federal money was coming in, and it looked pretty good, and the state government has been saying, yep, we're behind the Gonski money, we're going to make this happen. And at the same time, the state government is reducing the state contribution to education in my state. For example, fiscal 12-13, the state government was spending $821 million on our state schools. The following year, $819 million on state schools, a reduction of $3 million. Following year, this is 14-15, $812 million a year, a reduction of a further $7 million, or a total of $9 million reduced over 2 years. So that the net spend has been going down, because some, not all I should add, but some state and territory governments have been using Gonski as a smokescreen to be cutting their education funding. What's the good of Canberra putting in extra money when the state and territory governments are taking it away? Don't we care about our children? Don't we care about our kids in our schools? Don't we understand the importance of education in this country? We're supposed to be a smart country. We're supposed to be preparing for the future economy. How can we do that when we're underfunding our schools at a time when we can afford to fund them properly? Now that I've been talking about Tasmania, Deputy Speaker, can I add another Tasmanian perspective on this and what the government's proposal will do to Tasmania in the next 2 years? The Turnbull government, if it gets its way with its version of so-called Gonski, will be reducing funding to education in Tasmania during the next 2 years, this is calendar 18 and calendar 19, by $85 million, of which $65 million would have gone to our public schools. So the government can't come in here and crow about how good all this is, because you're crowing about something in 10 years' time. Well, me and our children in my state, we're worried about education next year in 2018, and education the year after in 2019. And to use those figures again, Deputy Speaker, calendar 18, calendar 19, Canberra will pay Tasmania under the proposed model by the current government $85 million less, and $65 million of that will be ripped out of our public schools. Now, you know, you people, you come from big states, you mightn't think $85 million less on education and $65 million less for public schools. You mightn't think that's a big deal. Well, it's a very big deal in my home state, a very big deal. And I see it every day that I go to my young daughter's public school to pick them up from school in the afternoon. My children go to a public primary school and I'm proud of it, and it's a great little school. But it can only be held together so much longer with these sorts of funding cuts. They've already lost staff and programs in recent years because of the net decline in funding for that school on account of the decisions of the Tasmanian Liberal Party state government, hiding behind the Gonski money. Deputy Speaker, excuse me if I sound animated and passionate about this, but that's exactly how I feel. I'm sick and tired of the Liberal national parties and the Labor Party using education policy and so-called Gonski as a political plaything to score points against each other, because that's all it is. It's an opportunity to improve popularity or to improve chances of being elected at the next election. No wonder the community is sick and tired of politics and politicians. You know, the government wonders why they've had 13 news polls behind and they're still stuck on 47%. The Labor Party wonders why its leader is so unpopular. The only reason Labor's travelling on 53 at the moment is because they're not the LNP. I mean, no wonder the community's had a gutsful of politics and politicians when they see something as important as education policy and education funding having become a plaything. When the community, you know, they learn about this Gonski and they think, what's all that mean? And they do a bit of research and they see that Gonski recommended $5 billion a year, and when indexed it's actually $6.5 billion a year. And what are we delivering? We've got a Labor Party defending $2.65 billion a year, and we've got an LNP arguing for $1.86 billion a year. All when we've got a federal budget bearing down on $500 billion a year. What are our priorities in this place, Deputy Speaker? This is an outrage. We are letting the community down. The community want the politics taken out of this. The community want governments and the parliament to support the spending of our wealth and our good fortune on the things that matter. Things like our schools, and spending it on our schools in a way that makes sure that our public schools are every bit as good as our independent and Catholic schools. The fact is we're a very rich and a very fortunate country. All of our schools can be the best schools in the world. We can have the best education system in the world. There is no barrier to that except our thinking and the way this parliament plays politics with education policy and education funding. Instead, we seem to think, or I don't, but some people in this place seem to think, maybe their kids going to independent Catholic schools, they think public education is a safety net, just like they think our public hospitals should be a safety net for the poor people. Well, that's garbage. We can afford to have the world's very best schools in both our public and our private sectors. So let's get rid of this public versus private debate, and let's realise with the wealth and the good fortune and the smarts we've got in this country, they can all be the world's best, and none of them will be a safety net for anyone. That people can choose which is the best school and the best match for their boy or girl, knowing that whatever school they choose will be well-funded and among the best, one of the best schools in the world. Deputy Speaker, I am so disappointed and so cross with the Liberal and National Party government for their proposal, and I'm so cross with the Labor Party for their half-hearted Gonski. There is an opportunity in this place to reset our priorities, to fund our schools properly. I don't like your Gonski and I don't like your Gonski, because neither are Gonski. Both of you are hiding behind David Gonski because you want to score political advantage out of him and his good name and his good recommendations. And as far as Tasmania goes, $85 million less over the next 2 years. That's unforgivable. This place is letting our kids down, and I'm appalled, and I think I speak for my members of my community when I say they're appalled.